against 13 subjects. And what has been happening is a local arrangement between the primary school teachers who are in that school and that teacher that was employed to actually cover up the syllabus in hook and crook to ensure that learners are actually engaged. But in real sense, Madam Speaker, and having passed a budget that included funds to employ more teachers for JSS classrooms, it is therefore evident that there is need to concretize the junior secondary schools in all our primary schools throughout the Republic of Kenya. Madam Speaker, you will realize that from next year, primary will run all the way to class 6. So we have extra 2 classrooms per school, those who have been up to standard 8. It means there is need to increase an extra classroom in every primary school to ensure that once the students reach grade 9, they have a space in all our primary schools throughout the Republic of Kenya to capture the 3 classrooms for JSS. Because that will be the highest level of JSS is at grade 9. So we need them we need to increase the funding. Madam Speaker, the CDF that we have that are in our constituencies, it's not enough to actually fund all the primary schools at once. There is need to rationalize resources and direct more resources to increase an extra class in our primary schools. Madam Speaker, there was an attempt which was not properly done. And this is why I agree with Rugu that this is the earliest thing is to be done now. There was a plan, they built one classroom in every secondary school, which never materialized. It hung in the air. So there is need now, as this one graduate this year to JSS 2 or 8, there is need to plan ahead of time so that whenever they reach grade 9, there is a space for them. Madam Speaker, there is also need, and this country should listen, is that the report should finally be released because it's not only about JSS. The presidential working part on reform of education should finally unveil their official report so that the children of Kenyans are not, and the teachers are not working on casework. Madam Speaker, what has been happening now is for those teachers who are P1, they are now being asked to go for a refresher course in teacher colleges to be able to actually teach CBC curriculum. Madam Speaker, that is good, but there is also need to take the secondary school teachers who are supposed to handle the junior secondary schools for another refresher course to be able to handle the CBC curriculum now revert at that level as junior secondary schools. So that, remember, the teachers that are handling these students now were only trained in 2 subjects. As per the, those who went for diploma and those who have gone degree, they were only trained in 2 subjects. And yet, we have a curriculum that has about 14 subjects. Madam Speaker, I agree that now proper guideline of the development of the curriculum, the regulations, the guidelines, so that the children of Kenya do not operate on a trial and error learning process. These are our children, and we want them to have competence as envisaged by this law, by this new curriculum. The CBC is meant that when you graduate from junior secondary, there is what is called pathways. Those who will go for the STEM, the science and technology, engineering and maths, it's called STEM. And those who will pursue career in arts and sports. So at that pathways, the students that graduate at grade 9 must be knowledgeable enough to be able to choose which path they will be able to take to pursue their education. Madam Speaker, the earlier the better, and this is why I support this, because we want at a level of exceeding of grade 9, people who are knowledgeable enough to pursue various places and education. But as well, there is also something very not very clear. What about these established high schools? The Alliance of this world, the Mangus of this world, the Kapsabet of this world. We need to equip those schools to become the senior secondary schools where students now will exceed to go to those schools so that they don't become village high schools and national schools. Because the consequence of that is every high school in that community will take their own, and that will not bring nationalism and cohesion. We need a curriculum that brings together the children of Kenya so that they will be able to study and pursue their education in such a manner that will bring unity and appreciate the diversity of the people of Kenya. Madam Speaker, the junior secondary schools now, in our primary schools, we keep them a budget for capitation. Madam Speaker, there should be a proper management of the junior secondary schools apart from the primary schools. This is the only way they will be able to appreciate that if there is a BOM, for example, for the primary, then there should be a separate management entity for the junior secondary schools. And one thing that is puzzling is, will these junior secondary schools operate under a different head teacher, or they will be under the same head teacher of a primary school? These are things that these guidelines must be able to sort out so that we have a different management because they have a different curriculum. So that the BOM of primary deals with primary matters and the head teacher of primary will deal with the primary curriculum. And then we have a head teacher that will be responsible for the JSS because after all, it moves from grade 7, 8, and 9. That's good enough. Those are good number of students to be handled and ran by a principal of their own and a board of their own so that they will be able to pursue their learning. We also want to make this thing to be affordable to Kenyans. The JSS curriculum must be affordable to parents of Kenya and must be accessible to the young. If you look at, I went to my local primary school called Torokwonin, I looked at grade 7. They are very young people. They are not able to track, travel for long distance to attend their JSS classrooms. Therefore, if we have agreed as a nation that it must be domiciled in primary, then every primary school in Kenya must be able to host JSS classrooms in their schools. Mr. Speaker, this motion should be seen to move from being a motion to a bill. Honorable Ruku, we must fast track this as we pass this motion, turn it to become a bill so that we have an act and amend the Act of Education Act 2012 to now bring in the new order in our education system. With those many remarks, I support the implementation of this particular motion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Oh, sorry.
That's your chance to speak.
Sorry, I didn't hear that, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I also stand to support this motion by my friend, Honorable Ruku. And it is very interesting, Mr. Speaker. The mover of the motion is asking us to urgently develop a comprehensive secondary school policy on JSS. And secondly, to develop a clear implementation framework. And I was having a chat, Mr. Speaker, with my good friend, Dr. Nyekal, whose idea I quickly borrowed, that actually while we support Honorable Ruku, it must be noticed here that actually we are doing something which we ought to have done long ago. Because, you know, as he says himself, and if I borrow his words, how do you have visitors come to your house and then you start preparing for them? I mean, we should have prepared this thing long, long ago. But now that we didn't do it, I think it is very good that we we start this implementation. When I look at this house, Mr. Speaker, I see two categories of people. I see people like myself who went to 7 years of secondary school, 7 years of primary school, 4 years of secondary, 2 years of high school, and 3 years of university. And Mr. Speaker, that is the same education that the people in the United Kingdom who gave us the education go through. Those are the ones that the neighboring Uganda go through. But, and I think myself, I always look at myself and I say, I'm very well educated. If I can just add another master's, I'll be like everybody else who is going to school nowadays. Then somewhere, the education changed, and I can see the second category here, the one that went through 844. When 844 was founded, it was based on the policy that we require practical, something that students can take home. So workshops were built, and a lot of other things, adjustments were made. And so majority of the members of parliament here, I believe, went through 844. Now, Mr. Speaker, for no apparent reason at all, we have CBC. And I think myself, and I don't know whether this would be outrageous, but I think it is time we put our education policy, our education system in the Constitution so that it does not change like the weather. Another government will come. We in Kenya are very, very good at something called benchmarking. Sometimes one of you might go to Papua New Guinea and see something good there, and you come and tell the whole country, we are changing like Papua New Guinea. I think there must be a stop to overhauling. We can change some things in the education system, but we cannot just overhaul our education system every day, put it upside down. One day, 844, another day, CBC, another day. I think that we should put a stop to this. But having said that, Mr. Speaker, this is the reality. The Kenya Kwanza government says that this thing was started by the Jubilee government. I personally never see a difference, because when you look at it clearly, the last government that this parliament had was the Jubilee government. And most of them sat in cabinet. But whatever the case, they have inherited a system which we now must live with. And when I look at it myself, I say, we now have primary school ending in standard 6, I think, or they call grade 6. The current one that we are going through is still on, going through to 7 and 8. The policy should develop and say, after that, grade 9, what is going to happen in grade 9? So we have to prepare and look ahead so that we don't again get kids getting to grade 9 who have come from JSS and we don't know what is going to happen to them. Now here is a question of teachers. Now I had a gracious lady here say, no, it doesn't matter whether they are old teachers or not, but these people have told us that this is a new system of education. Who are the experts for delivering this system of education? I think we must get the teacher training to be then customer fitted, should be good for purpose. We should therefore now train teachers for purposes of going to CBC, to train them. And we also need to adjust ourselves. And this is the question I think Honorable McLap or somebody has asked. Are these people, are these children in secondary school or they are in high school? First, they are too young to be in secondary school. But we have called them secondary school students, and we have made them think like secondary school students. We have to create a certain adjustment so that as soon as possible, we shift these kids to secondary school so that they don't be called junior secondary when in fact they are senior primary. There are many, many gaps in this education system that need to be addressed. I have not gone to textbook center of late, but which are the books that are now going to be used to teach these students? Have we prepared enough materials for training our students in JSS? We have a lot of issues that need to go into this policy. And I really want to congratulate my friend, Honorable Ruku, for thinking about it. Because unless we go through all these things, we do not have a good education system. And then lastly, I just want to say that the position of CDF is acknowledged in this matter. I know that the ministry sends capitation. Personally, I think the ministry must develop a way of monitoring how capitation works. Because the teachers are receiving capitation, but when you go to them, they say, Mheshimiwa, utusaidie kununua desk, tusaidie kununua hii. Who, where, what exactly is capitation being used for? The CDF money that has been sent to constituencies has done a lot in this 1 year. Does capitation also do development? Can we be able to have a good explanation of how it works? Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to support.
Members, you should be looking at your mics. If you ask to speak, the reason the mics are there is so that you're able to see them and speak. The Honorable Madenge.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I stand to support the motion by Honorable Ruku on the policy on JSS. It is important, Honorable Speaker, that this country starts to take the education of our children much more seriously than is happening today. Honorable Speaker, what we find is that despite the CBC program having started literally 7 years ago, when it was time for junior secondary, we started learning around helter-skelter like a country that did not know that this date was coming. And even now, with the patchwork that allowed us to commence JSS in the primary schools, you find that we have again gone back and we are sitting on our laurels, not knowing what will happen by the time the next 2 years are over and it's time for our kids to join senior secondary. More importantly, is that nobody in this country, including the mandarins at the Ministry of Education, can give a clear, coherent roadmap on exactly what we are doing at junior secondary. And it is important, Honorable Speaker, that we do not fail our children. We've been speaking of a lost generation that has disappeared into alcohol and drug abuse. We are preparing at this pace another lost generation that is pursuing JSS unless we can put our acts together. Honorable Speaker, a lot of the JSS children, despite the hardships that are there, have not even been able to coherently and consistently attend school because the new JSS came with a new set of uniforms, new requirements for desks and chairs and books that parents had not been prepared for. And therefore it is important that this motion is taken very, very seriously by this House and the ministry in terms of restoring order in our education system. Honorable Speaker, the current grading system at Form 4, Kenya Certificate of Secondary Education, is producing a wasted number of our young people in this country. Because when we analyze the KCSE performance, we find that barely 20% of our Form 4 students may attain the minimum university entrance grade. After that, another 28% attain the diploma college's admission grade. And therefore, we have about 15% of our school leavers at Form 4 competing for certificate and craft courses. And Honorable Speaker, the tragedy of this country is when we find that even a voluntary service like NYS requires our graduates to have a D plane at Form 4. What are we telling our young people in this country as legislators and leaders in terms of the plan we have for their future? And no wonder we have a crop of very many young girls and boys who are literally present in every shopping center in this country, saying they have nothing to do except indulge in cheap liquor and alcohol, that as a country and as a leadership, we have failed to curtail its production and distribution. We are poisoning our young people as we watch, as traders have taken our country hostage because they want to make money at any cost. The formulation of a coherent policy, clear and well understood by not only our students but also our parents, will give a clear roadmap for the desires of our young people. The sending home of our children in secondary schools has to stop as a policy in this country. The cost of uniforms varies from school to school. Why should there be a difference between the cost of uniform in secondary schools? The cost of the feeding program for lunch varies from school to school, even schools that are neighboring in the same town. If you go to Nyeri Town constituency, a school known as DEB and a school known as Temple Road Primary, both of them, literally neighbors, have a different cost for lunch. And you find that the biggest burden today that parents of children in our schools are having is the cost of school feeding. And therefore, this policy must also begin to address the issues of the cost of feeding in our schools and also the cost of uniforms, as well as the cost of the construction of multipurpose halls, which have become a darling for all schools today, the funding of school buses, and therefore we need a clear government policy on the cost of some of these burdens that are being borne by our parents, largely jeopardizing the education and the future of our children. Honorable Speaker, SDG 4 requires us to ensure that our education is inclusive, equitable, and of the same quality. And therefore, the question that begs us as legislators is the quality of education offered at Kahumo High School in Nyeri Town constituency, same as the quality of education offered at Kehuyo Secondary School in my rural village. It is clear in our minds that the answer is no. Then how can we be signatories to the SDGs and then as leaders we sit and allow this kind of disparities to continue? When we come to the management of teachers, in Nyeri Town constituency, which is largely a municipality, it was a municipality even before the new constitution came into place. I have teachers who are paid the enhanced house allowance for teachers working in municipalities, and another teachers in the same school, in neighboring schools, who are not being paid the enhanced house allowance. When you approach the management of teachers in the Teacher Service Commission, they want to pretend that they are not aware that these disparities are existing. And Honorable Speaker, it is time that some of these institutions that are managing the affairs, the important affairs of the country, like the Teachers Service Commission, should be invited in this House to answer questions from legislators. The question of the ministers coming in to answer for constitutional commissions and other bodies that are playing crucial roles in the affairs of our country should come to an end. For how long can we keep shielding these people while the problems keep piling? Honorable Speaker, what exam will the JSS...
Honorable Madenge, you probably know that under the rules we changed, the independent commissions answer questions at the committee level. Like all the commissions in this country is supposed to stake their questions to the relevant committees.
Honorable Speaker, I am well guided. However, if all of us have an interest in when the Teacher Service Commission is appearing before the 15 members of the Education Committee, I am sure if this was opened for us as friends of the committee, the members here would overwhelm the membership of the committee. And that is a weakness sometimes in our system that we need to be alive to and get to address. Honorable Speaker, in ending, what exam will the junior secondary students sit at the end of their 3 years? And how is that exam going to impact their advancement into senior secondary? Honorable Speaker, I support this motion. And Honorable Luku, this could not have come at a better time. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you. Member for Sirisia.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker, for giving me a chance also to contribute on this important motion. Honorable Speaker, education is the key of everything all over the world. And Honorable Speaker, I want to thank the member who has brought this very important motion for discussion. I rise to support this motion, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, when I speak about CPC, Honorable Speaker, I think our constitution sometimes lapses because it has not been anchored very well in the constitution, Honorable Speaker, because every minister who is appointed, especially in the Ministry of Education, he wants to make changes on his or her own decision as he or she feels. Right when you check from 844, even from during Moi's time, Honorable Speaker, there have been many changes on this curriculum every time. And this has affected our children. This has affected our parents. Like now we say that education in Kenya is free primary education. But CPC has made it more expensive to the parents than before. So you can say that there's no free primary education in Kenya, Honorable Speaker, just because the Principal Secretary visited another country and copied from there, and he made sure that it works in Kenya. It is working either, but it's not working very well, Honorable Speaker. And that is why members, every member has his or her own thinking negatively about the CPC. There are no teachers, like where we come from, in the rural constituencies where we come from, there are no teachers. If indeed they wanted a change, good change in the curriculum, Honorable Speaker, we cannot come up with the junior secondary school and again it remain domicile in the primary school and with only one teacher, either with the 8 students. That means that the ministry was not ready, the DSC was not ready to post the teachers to teach that the new class that has been promoted from primary, and then it remains again there with no teachers. So the government must do something. One, to remove school fees, paying a lot of money, and again the practicals which they do, Honorable Speaker. They send children to bring chicken to school, to slaughter for practicals. If it is a class has 100 children, it means they are taking 100 chicken to school, Honorable Speaker, for slaughter, to make teachers feel fat, enjoy eating chicken from parents. Honorable Speaker, I want the members to dig in properly about this CPC to see actually if it is helping us as a country, in the education sector or not. Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I support.
The Honorable Waluke just decided that your point of order was not necessary. So, members, I wish to recognize the presence of pupils from Eno Matasiani Primary School of Kajiado North in Kajiado County, and pupils from Vidhu Ramji Secondary School from Kiharu in Murang'a County. We welcome them to the National Assembly to follow our proceedings today. This chance now goes to Honorable Kagushia of Mukurweini. It's not in the House. It goes then to Honorable Majimbo Kalasinga of Kabuchai. Huh? The Honorable Kagushia, is he around? The Honorable Kagushia, you can't be doing that. Just give him the mic.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I want to appreciate, and I promise that I will take the shortest time possible. Honorable Speaker, I stand to support the motion by Honorable Ruku on the funding of, or development of a policy on funding of JSS in this Republic of Kenya. Honorable Speaker, I have, first of all, looked at a very quick glance of how JSS has been conducted in Mukurweini constituency. And I've seen that out of 66 schools, public schools that exist in Mukurweini constituency, I've seen that we have about 18 schools that are not being funded as JSS. And of course, that makes me worried, because I understand that whenever a school has a JSS program, it receives an excess of the normal capitation that are going to schools with a substantial amount of money. And that in essence means that all the schools that are not having JSS in the primary schools that we had before are no longer receiving that capitation. For example, picked out like a school like Wanjide Primary, Matuto Primary, Mukoi Primary, Washe Primary, Kirongi Primary, Gashirero Primary, Ningaine, Kiawaita, Matiraine, Mutowade, Wangera, Ngora, Mwati, Itito, Gakera, Wahari, Wanguro, and Gakima primary schools are not having JSS. And Honorable Speaker, that is why I strongly stand to support the motion that we come up with a better arrangement on how we are going to fund these JSS schools or the primary schools that we had, so that our students can stop traveling long distances to access very basic education in other areas. I, for example, had parents from schools like Wanjide who have come to my office and really complaining because their students are walking a long distance to access education. Honorable Speaker, I appreciate that a bit of staffing is being done. I've looked at the newspapers today, and I've seen that TSC has advertised for about 20,000 positions of teachers in JSS primary schools. And I've seen the advert, and I really want to encourage our people to apply for those applications, for those job opportunities. But, Honorable Speaker, this being the case, we still have a challenge because the 20,000 is adding to what we had before, and I'm not very sure that this is going to be, completing the cycle of staffing in all our schools. You realize that most of the JSS primary schools, we are having the teachers taking on subjects that they not train in college. You, for example, have someone taking chemistry or biology, yet they had trained in literature or English. And of course, that is lowering the quality of education in our JSS schools. So, Honorable Speaker, I strongly want to support that we come up with a a policy where we are going to systematically and strategically support and fund the JSS secondary schools. Honorable Speaker, finally, I also want to note that the government has increased, and this parliament has passed a budget that has increased the amount of funding for JSS from 15 billion Kenya shillings to 25 billion Kenya shillings. That is a whopping increase of 10 billion Kenya shillings, which is a good thing, which we must commend. But can we then have a policy by the ministry, together with TSC, which is going to properly guide how this funding is going to be implemented in schools, so that we're able to balance between the staffing, the infrastructure, and we're able to also look at the primary schools that did not receive the JSS, because basically we are simply killing those primary schools that are now up to class 6 or grade 6. Honorable Speaker, I please beg to support this motion and congratulate my honorable member Roko for having brought this useful motion to this assembly. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
I presume it is me. Speak up.
Member for Seme, proceed with your contribution.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support this.
Just order. I've seen everyone look at me. I've given 8 this side, 7 this side, without a single member from this side since we started this debate. Not one.
And I was the earliest this side.
So just relax. Just relax. It's
okay.
to ensure that we are a house that has minority and majority. So it's my duty to ensure that both sides speak.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When you look at orphans well, you get blessed. Now, I rise to support this motion, and I really must appreciate and congratulate Honorable Ruku. There are times that we put aside politics and look at the welfare of the nation, and this is one such time. Mr. Speaker, if you look at what Honorable Ruku is asking us, that we need to set a policy, guidelines, and implementation framework for a project where pupils are already in class. How far can you be with putting a cart before a horse? It is even shameful that we are talking about that and the children are already in class. If you are still talking of policy, guidelines, implementation framework, do we even have an implementation timeline? How these kids will move? Honorable members here were saying, proposing how kids should move and where classes are. These are things that should have been in the books before we started. Because this is planning. This is making things work. This is not impressing people. There's a difference. If you are looking for votes, yes, well, it would work. But if we want to educate our children, we must go the way Honorable Ruku is proposing, and it should have happened earlier. What do we have an infrastructure needs? Do we know? We had classrooms built in secondary schools. The kids are now in primary schools. I know there's transition, but even that I'll raise issues about. What about the human resource? We are saying here that some old people, were picked, some old teachers. It does not matter. They were trained. But do we know their needs? What about the financial needs? How were schools picked to house JSS? In my constituency, a large number, nearly half, actually do not have JSS. And if you picked this, how were the number of pupils identified for planning financial needs? When I asked, I was told they looked at the number of kids in standard 6 or who are now moving to 7 to start junior secondary. But now when you have amalgamated them, this is not the same number of kids because you have put kids from other places. How was that one? How? I really ask my colleagues, how can that happen? You mean nobody sat down to do simple arithmetic? Because that should have been done. And even then, the money is not coming regularly. We can understand that. Mr. Speaker, we can talk that there was a transition, that there was another government and the government and change. In fact, if there is a transition, Mr. Speaker, the duty is on the incoming person to make sure that you take up in a way. The country will not listen to you blaming those who have gone. They have gone. If you find their errors, your duty is now to correct those errors. So this transition should have been extremely meticulous. We were planning to take kids in secondary schools. We decided in one day we are going to primary. At that point, meticulous planning was needed. It is clear to everybody now that that was not done. And this is just one example, actually, in the whole ministry, where policies are not properly formulated. We have had very major changes in this ministry. We have the competency-based with the JSS. We have 100% transition. How do we now link and coordinate 100% transition with JS? What is the transition point now? What is the transition point now? Before we knew, it was standard 8 to Form 1. Now, we have junior secondary. So where is the transition point? Where is the 100%? We have just come from the issue of delocalization and relocalization. How do you harmonize that with JSS? How do you harmonize that with the 100% transition? The main purpose of competence-based is that the kids should have practical skills. In the infrastructure planning, school classrooms, we seem to be okay, we can be okay because CDF had put out a lot of classrooms in my constituencies. All the JSS classrooms are in classrooms that we built in primary schools for those schools. Now they're being used in a way, in a very good way, they're being used to house JSSS. So again, his Honorable Ruku's idea that how we use CDF is welcome. But if it is competence-based, there are two issues in infrastructure that I don't hear about. Are we going to have laboratories or are we going to have workshops? When those chicken that the Honorable Member was talking about, are they going to be slaughtered in a workshop or are they going to, the ones that are slaughtered, the ones that will be eaten, I know where they'll be slaughtered. That's not a problem. But the ones that are for teaching, will they be slaughtered in a laboratory or are they going to be, well, if it's a laboratory, it will be called dissection. Will they be dissected in a laboratory? They will be dissected in a workshop. In the kitchen. Or if it is fish. Okay, now, gentlemen, we can laugh, but these are very serious issues. Are we going to put up, if we want them to have skills in agriculture, if we want them to have skills in creating artifacts, that will need workshops. Some of us went to primary schools when there were workshops. I don't hear about workshops. How many workshops? How many laboratories? When do you transition from laboratory to workshop? Because they do different things. When is the streaming going to happen? Because when you have streamed, then you know who will need workshops and you will know who will need laboratories. Where are these issues being discussed? So, Mr. Speaker, we have put the cart before the horse, and we must go back, as Honorable Ruku has indicated, and do the planning. If actually we meant well, I think this government was in a position to actually slow down the process and say, we are not satisfied with the planning, we slow this down for a year, and then we will plan it properly. I think the country would have accepted that. We must reach a point where we are not driven by politics. I know 2027 is coming, but let me tell you, it is the good work that will take us there, not the impression that we create. Impressions will fizzle out. The real work will come. So let's go back and do this, even if you are doing it late. It is better late than never. Let's go and look at our kids. Mr. Speaker, I support this. And we are saying urges. I think we need to remove that word urges. We should resolve. We should amend to resolve. Urges means they may or may not, but we want them to do. And if you have to put it into an act of parliament, Honorable Ruku, go ahead on this one, we'll support you. Not like when I always oppose you in TV discussions. That's politics. But now it is about our children. We'll support it. Bring the bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Nyikal. The member for Kabuchai.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I think Honorable Ruku, Member of Parliament from Mbeere North, has done a very good job. We have a lot of issues that this bill will address, Mr. Speaker. We want it to address several issues. And Mr. Speaker, if we have to go even back and see, if we have to address the confusion that was placed last year, Mr. Speaker, when even CBC classes were built in secondary schools. Not only that, Mr. Speaker, even the contractors who did this job, up to date as I speak, Mr. Speaker, have not been paid. The contractors, Mr. Speaker, are being auctioned. They did a job for government, they were never paid, and I don't know when they will pay this, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if you look at this one, public primary schools, Mr. Speaker, cannot afford the expense aspect of these JSS. Mr. Speaker, yesterday, I was speaking to my daughter, who said that in their school they require 8,000 for home science. To me, as a member of parliament, it's no problem, Mr. Speaker. But what of that child of a border in Nakitumba Primary School, where he cannot manage that amount? Mr. Speaker, as Honorable Nyikal said, I want now to agree in totality that this program was started before the policy. I wish Honorable Ruku was there before CBC was put in place. Thank you very much, Honorable Ruku, for thinking ahead, though late, but with this policy, we can change things for the betterment of our nation. This is the time where we are bringing heads together. Last week, Mr. Speaker, I was at home. We were having secondary schools, games and sports. Mr. Speaker, there is a confusion. Junior secondary schools, students cannot play in secondary school games. Neither can they compete in primary schools. Mr. Speaker, they are standing between. If they play in secondary school games, the junior ones mock them. You are supposed to be in second. We must place the right things first. I was wondering, Mr. Speaker, but now that it has come here for address, let us give this thing first priority. As I support this, Mr. Speaker, let us give it the first priority. Also, let's look at some schools that cannot manage. If this JSS was expensive enough and government had not planned for it, it would have waited. It would have looked first for money. So, Speaker, if you come and see some of the facilities, we have very good private schools, Mr. Speaker. Private schools have the best laboratories, they have good libraries, and Mr. Speaker, they are getting a due advantage ahead of the public schools. What are we going to do? So, Speaker, if you tell us that they will be sitting for exams during grade 9, what are we putting in place so that these exams reflect a transition that is proper from now junior secondary to senior secondary? If I were asked before, Mr. Speaker, I wouldn't have named the junior secondary. I would have named the senior primary. Because when it is senior primary, Mr. Speaker, the teachers in primary schools will be comfortable to teach. You know very well, Mr. Speaker, that teachers are given, they are given guidelines. The policy does not allow a primary school teacher to teach in a secondary school. But as I talk today in Sikusi Primary School and Namilama, Mr. Speaker, teachers handling junior secondary schools are only 2 or 1, handling 18 subjects, Mr. Speaker. What did we do? Honorable Ruku has brought well this so that we discuss properly. We iron out things that we don't have and do it in good faith and put these things ahead so that should we move out of this thing, move out together and do it things properly, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as I speak here, when I was looking for votes in Kabuchai constituency, we were saying that the moment we take over this office, we shall remove CBC because it was expensive. Parents were not managing. But now, even with the more expensive life, Mr. Speaker, we need the government to totally take over the expense aspect, so that parents cannot be missed, some students cannot miss classes because of this, Mr. Speaker. So, Speaker, all along, I've moved around here, and how I wish that the people in Mbere who elected Honorable Ruku repeat again and elect him again, Mr. Speaker. Thank you as I support this for the correct of this nation, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Ndikiri.
Please give me the mic. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me apologize first because somebody picked it.
The Honorable Ndikiri was way ahead of you on this list. He just doesn't have a card. And
Somebody picked my card and my phone. It's very unfortunate that I think as members, we need to respect one another when you meet.
Honorable Ndikiri, go on to your debate.
Yes. Mr. Speaker, I want to dwell on what curricular CBC means. It has 7 core competencies, because I think that's where we're having a problem. The first is communication and collaboration. The second is critical thinking and problem solving. The third is creativity and imagination. The fifth is citizenship, digital literacy, learning to learn. Mr. Speaker, fellow members, we have a system that has recognized the core competencies, but implementing